Close reading strategies, when we are in our literature class, are strategies that we use specifically for smaller pieces of text, passages from a novel, or several paragraphs from a short story, or poetry. When we start reading some of that, we haven't done that yet. And the point of these close reading strategies is to move beyond understanding the surface kind of stuff of plot or characterization, and to pay more attention to the smaller stuff, like the way the author uses language and the effect that that language has on how you understand a text. So what I focus or loosely base my close reading strategies on are the strategies developed by a Dr. Gerald Wright from the University of Pittsburgh. I think it's a pretty easy process that helps us delve more deeply without feeling like we have to know everything about a piece of work before we can analyze it. So it's a 3-step process. Interestingly enough, though, it's not a process that starts with 1. It starts with 0. And Dr. Wright's belief is we start at 0 because we can't move forward without basic understanding. So when I'm doing a close reading, that step 0 is me being able to summarize what's going on, what the characters are doing, or what the situation is at hand. To keep in mind, when you do a summary of something, you want to always do it at about 10% of the length of the original. So if I'm doing a 10-page summary, I never want to exceed, if I'm doing a 10-page short story, I never want to exceed a 1-page summary. And that's probably too much. So it's a good point of reference is, if you don't want to incorporate too many things, that you want to have about 10% of what that original piece is. So after I read a piece of text, even if I've already read it before and I'm focusing on a smaller portion, I want to do that step 0, which is to write that summary or paraphrase of what's going on. Okay? Step 1, after I have that basic understanding, is when I go back and reread. This is when I pay attention to the smaller points of the language. What do I notice about how the sentences are structured or syntax? What do I notice about punctuation? Is it usual or is it different? Does the author use it differently? What do I notice about diction? How does the author choose words? And this can be like kinds of verbs that the author uses, the adjectives, along those excuse me, I can't spell today, adjective choice, etc. Okay, and then this is also where I start paying attention to the figurative language and other rhetorical devices that the author could use. Now, we just reviewed these, so you should have a fresh memory of those types of things. So when I'm doing this step, I go back and reread, and I highlight, or I underline, or I circle, or I star, and I annotate. And what it means to annotate is I am marking the heck out of it in the margins. Like after I highlight in the margins, I'm going to write, this is why I highlighted it, basically. So I highlighted it because the sentence structure is unique, or this is an exceptional metaphor, or some other notification or not note making, of why you think that was important enough to highlight. Okay? And then the last step after I've gone through and done that is erasing this first, is step 2, and this is where I explain the impact that the things I noticed have on my understanding of the passage or the work as a whole. Okay, so this is basically sentences or paragraphs where I'm taking the specifics of the passage that I highlighted, and I'm writing out the explanation of what impact that has on my understanding of the text. Okay? So understanding, noticing, and explaining. I'm going to pull a passage from To Kill a Mockingbird for us to refer to as our exemplar. I'm going to do it using my pen, and then I'm going to make another 2 videos to show you guys how to do the same process in a Word document, whether you're on a phone or on a computer, for those of you who don't want to have to like print paper out and stuff like that. So this is a passage from chapter 1 of To Kill a Mockingbird. So my first step is understanding, so I need to go through and I need to read it. So that's what I'm going to do, just to get an understanding of what's going on. Maycomb was an old town, but it was a tired old town when I first knew it. In rainy weather, the streets turned to red slop. Grass grew on the sidewalks. The courthouse sagged in the square. Somehow it was hotter then. A black dog suffered on a summer's day. Bony mules hitched to Hoover carts flicked flies in the sweltering shade of live oaks in the square. Men's stiff collars wilted by 9 in the morning. Ladies bathed before noon, after their 3 o'clock naps, and by nightfall were like soft tea cakes with frostings of sweat and sweet talcum. People moved slowly then. They ambled across the square, shuffled in and out of the stores around it, took their time about everything. A day was 24 hours long, but seemed longer. There was no hurry, for there was nowhere to go, nothing to buy, and no money to buy it with. Nothing to see outside the boundaries of Maycomb County. But it was a time of vague optimism for some of the people. Maycomb County had recently been told that it had nothing to fear, but fear itself. We lived on the main residential street in town. Atticus, Jem, and I, plus Calpurnia, our cook. Jem and I found our father satisfactory. He played with us, read to us, and treated us with courteous detachment. Calpurnia was something else again. She was all angles and bones. She was nearsighted, she squinted, her hand was wide as a bed slat and twice as hard. She was always ordering me out of the kitchen, asking me why I couldn't behave as well as Jem when she knew he was older, and calling me home when I wasn't ready to come. Our battles were epic and one-sided. Calpurnia always won, mainly because Atticus always took her side. She had been with us ever since Jem was born, and I had felt her tyrannical presence as long as I could remember. So, step 0, that understanding. I'm going to write a quick summary of what that passage was about, I should say. Whoop. Maybe I could spell. Okay, so that's my quick summary of what we just read there. Maycomb was kind of boring because no one had anything to do. or money, and then the rest about the Finch family. So my step 1 is going to be to go back and do a rereading, and I'm going to highlight this time, of things that I notice as I'm reading through, and I'm going to annotate in the margins. So so you can look at my, I wasn't going to narrate since you guys can see what I'm writing down there. And that's why I ask you guys to annotate, because you highlighting and then jotting down what it is will allow me to see your thought process, as well as allow you to remember it whenever you refer back to this. Should we have to write an essay on To Kill a Mockingbird, you'll have that already put together for you. Okay, so I'm not going to continue to do the rest of this. I'm actually going to leave that to you guys to do in class. But so now that I've done step 1 for that particular paragraph, you'll notice, I highlighted the fact that Maycomb was an old town, but it was a tired old town. That's the personification of the town. That's what I noticed. There was a whole lot of imagery there. There was lots of alliteration. And then I noticed that she was referencing time a lot, and then the simile about the ladies being like tea cakes. Okay, so that's step 1 just for that paragraph. So step 2 is going to be the explanation. And so I'm going to be referring back to that. And let's say I'm going to look at, the imagery and the alliteration. Those are the 2 I'm going to focus on. So Lee uses imagery to Look and see what I'm looking at here. Okay. Okay, so that's me explaining how I understand her use of imagery there and personification. So this sets the mood for the novel, suggesting the conflicts may be even harder to overcome. That's, in my opinion, how those things impact the meaning of the work. Okay, and I'm going to go on and use the alliteration. Nope. That should be one word. I'm not sure why I put a big space there. Okay, so that, if I'm focusing on the alliteration, for me, the explanation is that those sounds soften the mood and give it like a sleepy feeling, almost like the quiet before the storm of change. So even though this passage is doesn't hint at anything along the lines about the conflict, since we've read the entire book, I can refer to that because I understand that this is a contribution to the meaning of the work as a whole. Okay, so that's just an example from the first paragraph of that. What you guys are going to do is do the rest of the passage. We'll do it and then we'll share in class. But what I want you to do is, when you're watching this, is make sure you're taking notes, and then we'll talk more about this. This is going to be a process that we do throughout the course of the year for everything we read. I'll pull passages and ask you to do a closer analysis of them. So understanding those literary terms and devices and paying attention to language will be important things that we need to make sure that we're practicing.